This wasn't a final that Arsenal lost. It was a final that Arsenal never entered. And if you want to understand why, don't look at the goals. Look at everything that was missing in that 90 minutes. Because Arsenal weren't Arsenal. From the first whistle, something felt off. There was some absence that was missing. And yes, Arsenal, did a couple of things, in that first half. And I was at the stadium, watching a team that seemed like they ran out of ideas in that first 20 minutes. There wasn't any rhythm, there was no bravery in the team. And it felt like Arsenal were playing the idea of a final rather than playing the final themselves. And when you arrive, at a game of this magnitude without your creative players, no Odegaard, no Eze, and out of sort Saka, um, you don't just lose quality, you actually lose direction. And Arsenal felt like they were just going nowhere fast. The ball was moving, but the football wasn't. Um, and listen, when you look at this game, critically look at this game, um, the data doesn't make for good reading at all. In fact, it actually makes for very uncomfortable reading. And I don't know where I rank this game in terms of our performance. It's not just about the result, because I was very, very confident in this game. Going into Wembley, looking forward to celebrating with Arsenal. And of course, it was a long ride back when you get absolutely pummeled in that way. Now, look at this. Look at this momentum graph. This isn't control, it's not dominance. Arsenal didn't build any pressure, didn't create any waves. There was no spell, not one, where City had to adjust something in this game. City were flat too, but they were comfortable being flat because it felt like that's how they wanted the game to be. But Arsenal weren't. Again, look at this. Our fullbacks. This is the most on Arsenal heat map I have seen in a very, very long time. Maybe in the last 2 years, I haven't seen a heat map like this for our fullbacks. Ben White pinned, Nkapie pinned. Look at the part of the pitch that they were operating on. No overlaps, no underlaps, no laps, anything, no progression at all. And when Arsenal fullbacks don't move, the whole structure and the system collapses. This is how Arsenal function. This is how Arsenal are able to create those mismatches in the final third. Now our wingers become isolated, the striker becomes disconnected, and bless his socks, Gyökeres, he was running hard. I could see it running hard, but most times he was running with no one around him completely. Our midfield was very horizontal, and when you play like this, it's safe. It really is safe, and safe doesn't win you finals, not at all. And then there's the pass network. There's a big giant hole there, where Odegaard should be, Eze should be. Everything sideways, nothing breaking the lines, nothing connecting phases. It wasn't a team that was missing chances. It was just a team just missing its center of gravity, I would say. Um, and then, of course, the moment, a routine cross, simple claim, and a goalkeeper with a history at Wembley that everyone knew, except for the one who needed to make the decision. And full disclosure, not to be hypocritical, um, I wasn't necessarily upset with the fact that Kepa was playing. I thought there was something in there, but I guess, as a coach, I mean, we are fans, we can kind of look at things in, different perspective. We don't always have all the facts and information, but I probably count that this is the fourth final, including today, that Kepa has lost and not been himself. At some point, you think that maybe things will change, but certain players are made for certain environments. You talk about, Eze and Spurs. You talk about Drogba at Wembley, Ramsey at Wembley as well. There are players that you kind of play them in certain situations because something always happens around them. Um, Kepa didn't just drop the ball; he actually handed Manchester City belief, and you don't give belief to a team like that. And you can see it instantly in the moment. City go from being passive to being almost predatory. And from that moment, the game wasn't played on equal terms anymore. Um, it was a real turning point in the game. Now, listen, when we do this reaction, we talk about things that Arsenal did well and things that we didn't. We kind of touch about the things that we didn't, but the things that went well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, and you can understand why. When you have a game like this, um, it almost pales into comparison. What we saw that was very, very glaring, but I do want to give props to, a couple of players. Declan Rice played like a man, trying to drag the team forward, by force. And Gabriel, he fought very hard, in the duels, especially in the first half. I saw him heading everything. You know, Haaland really didn't get a sniff. Let's be honest. Saliba and Gabriel, they played their well, and Zubimendi, he kept things from collapsing. Honestly, he really, really played well in this game. I haven't. It's been a while. He wasn't the problem. Let's just say that Zubimendi wasn't the problem. And I've probably rattled a couple of the ups here, and maybe the fact that we didn't allow Manchester City to even have a shot on target. I don't really remember in the first half where City was really looking like they were going to score, but you knew that things were always going to change. And that's where we start to see the downs when it comes to this game, because things definitely changed. And of course, the first down is a goalkeeper decision. Hindsight is great, but hey, Mikel, this is why you get paid the big bucks, to make this decision. And I heard what he said in the press conference. He was doing it, because it was fair. But you could also argue that Norgard played a lot in the cup. He didn't play in this game. Miles Lewis Kelly was instrumental to us getting here. He didn't play in this game. So it does feel like the goalkeeping position is treated very differently. And listen, it's awful. It's really, really awful on Kepa. And I don't want to be like, be the one kind of, bang it in. But yeah, it wasn't really the mistake he made. I think for me, it comes down to the decision. A final at Wembley, a keeper who's got a history that's not so good in big moments. It was a risk that didn't need to be taken, and Arsenal paid for it big time. Second for me was the fullback structure. When we talked about that, it wasn't just the individuals, but I just felt the structure was there. We lost a lot of width. We lost the support that the fullbacks bring for us. Calafiori came in and he brought a couple of different things, and you start to wonder, maybe as soon as Nkapia had that yellow card in the first half, maybe he needed to be yanked off. Calafiori needed to be brought in, to make a couple of changes to the team, because this team doesn't function when their fullbacks doesn't function. And last for me, just the hesitation. Hesitation, and there's nothing more that encapsulates that hesitation than the chance that Harvard had in the first half. You got to bury that. You don't get this many chances when you face elite opposition like this. And I hope that this serves as a warning, going into the Champions League games, because you're going to be faced with situations like this. And that's the beautiful thing about football. Football gives you a test more often than not, over and over again, until you show that you can pass it. So there will be another opportunity in a similar situation like this. And we're going to see if Arsenal can actually rise to the test. Arsenal can actually go the distance. Arsenal can actually rewrite, what is being written about them in terms of always getting there, but never able to punch it through. Um, Listen, this wasn't a game that Arsenal lost because City were better. They lost because they weren't recognizable. I don't think anyone who's watched Arsenal this season will look at that team and say, I recognize that team that was on the pitch. So it's hard to say that it wasn't about quality. And I don't think it necessarily was about tactics. I think it was about identity. We left our identity at home. Didn't say put it on the bus to Wembley. And maybe we got to Wembley and we left it in the tunnel. I do not know. But a defeat like this doesn't have to define the season. But it does ask a question. When the moment arrives, who do you trust as Arsenal? Can you trust your structure? Can you trust your creators? Can you trust your identity? Because this team is too good to fall apart, but they're also too good to disappear, like they did in this final.